I call the meeting to order. This is the Thursday, June 27th Policy Committee meeting. That's Policy Committee meeting. In attendance, we have Ms. Edwards from ADC, Mr. Campbell from DOT, Mr. Birch, and Mr. Steele from the Assembly. Pending the arrival of Flynn or Sullivan, we will change that as necessary. Craig, can you take us through our public service announcement, please?
All of our AMATS meetings are public meetings, and the public is welcome to comment on any items that we have before us. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by a staff or a consultant, and then the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss the matter, and at that point, then the public will be given an opportunity to comment. There you go.
Thank you. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody from the committee wish to propose any modifications to the agenda?
No.
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seconded. Any objections to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is now approved. Note the arrival of Mr. Flynn and the demotion of Mr. Steele. Won't be the first. Do we have any minutes before us, Mr. Lyons?
We do not, sir, but we will definitely have the next meeting.
Thank you. We have two business items. We have the 2015-18 TIP Transportation Improvement Program Criteria Approval. Mr. Lyon, are you going to comment on that?
I will get started on this.
Okay.
So when we have projects in our four-year program, the TIP, we obviously have to have some way of ranking and scoring them and figuring out which one bubbles to the top and which one might get a little lower score. So we have criteria for all the three categories that AMATS has an allocation for: roadways projects, transportation alternative projects, and the congestion mitigation and air quality projects. So every 4 years, when we have a new TIP that we're going to create, we look at the criteria to make sure they're still doing what we think they're supposed to be doing, to make sure we try to get them as objective as possible, so that the way that Mr. Birch might score something comes pretty close to how I might score it, just by looking at some objective criteria. In addition, we also want to make sure that they are current with the new regulations that come out. So as you know, NAP 21, there is a big push towards the idea of performance measures and making sure the stuff that you're doing is very measurable, so you're not, you know why you're doing a project. It specifically relates to decreasing fatal accidents or something like that. So there are a number of national goals and such that we now have that we're going to have to take into account. And so what we did with these is we tried to kind of pattern them off after the national goals with an eye towards performance measures, so that when we are required to do those, we're not required yet, but when we are, we're going to have performance measures related to the criteria that are in place right now that we can that are measurable. I don't remember exactly how many staff hours, but it's probably, well, there were a lot of meetings that the staff had, and then the TAC had 3 work sessions on this, and there were a number of other meetings by the Freight Committee and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to look at these. They went to the TAC 2 weeks ago, and here's what came out. We did have them out for public comment for right around 2 months' time, and while we had a lot of comment while we were creating them, when we actually released them and had them open for public comment, we only got 2 public comments. And so they are here with you, and there's a matrix in here that kind of describes them, gives the staff recommendation, and then shows what the TAC recommended 2 weeks ago. So we want to make sure people understand that we had a lot of comment throughout, but when we had the actual comment period open, there were only 2 comments received, so they are here. So I know the TAC made some changes, and they are now here before you. They did recommend that they be approved based on this. The idea now is that we will look at, we have to tweak our project nomination sheets forms for these 3 criteria. We'll base them off of these criteria, we'll send them out, and we'll open up the project nominations for about 2 months. So agencies, community councils, et cetera, individuals can nominate projects to be in our new TIP. So You have the criteria before you. I can go through the public comments and the TAC reaction to that, however detailed you want, or if you want to just start asking questions.
I think I want to ask just one general question before we get into public comment, if there are any, but can you describe if there were any significant changes to any of these criteria for those of us that maybe are not as sharp as we used to be in recalling these criteria from the past? So that, was there anything here of significant substance in your opinion that changed, or was it more a matter of tweaking and minor modifications within your judgment?
A lot of tweaking, a lot of minor modifications. We did add some new ones, and the format is different. Where we used to have, the category score would be 25 points for safety, and then you'd have a list of, if it really increases or improves safety, it's 25, and then down the list. Now we have a weighting, so we have it kind of broken up where you can see the safety ratings, and this is based on the DOT's HSIP safety index rating. And you get a number there, and you get a number from the bottom category, and then you weight it. So that's a big change. We never really had the weighting before. We had some weighting in the CMAT category, but not the other one. So that's kind of a different format. But the criteria are fairly similar. I mean, there's some minor tweaking going on.
Okay, let me ask another question then, and I don't mean to monopolize you, but when you ran this criteria, one of the things that quite often happens is you do a reverse look at your tip and say, hey, with this new criteria, does it change our whole if we had these projects under this scoring criteria, would it change the whole organization that we've got, or is it fairly consistent? And did you do that, and did you find there were any significant changes in project scorings as a result of this new scoring criteria and format?
Yeah, I did do a test ranking of a couple projects. I can't remember which ones I did right now off the top of my head. Something tells me I did Dowling, East Dowling, and that they've settled out about where they were before. So
Okay.
it's, ground truthing to make sure you're not way off. So
Okay.
I did that, and it seemed pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
Just let me point out the new criteria before,
Okay.
and then I'll leave it with you.
Okay.
Criteria number 13, this one on ITS, it's really been beefed up a lot. There was something pretty minor before, barely mentioning it in the CMAT category, but so that's a new criteria because intelligent transportation systems is very important with FHWA, and that's basically using computers or electronics in some sort of way to create a project. So signal timing relates to ITS, things of that nature. So it's very important to them, so we wanted to make sure we added a bigger criteria. Freight system, the next one, freight system, performance and reliable access. That's new. One of the new national goals in MAP 21 relates to freight movement and things of that nature, so that we added there. We kind of beefed up the security emergency response one. And then number 12, which is on page 5, above page 5, is environmental justice. That's, if you're not familiar with that term, that's basically the idea that if you're putting a road project in and it's going to be a new connection and it'll make people's commute that much better, if you put it right through the middle of a low-income neighborhood, that's not a good thing. That's not providing environmental justice. So it basically relates to that idea. And it's also big with FHWA.
Thank you. Mr. Birch?
I just looking at the numbers, I was trying to understand. Okay, so you've got improved safety, you've got a category weighting of 1. So when you do your calculation, is there a potential of 10 points then out of each, for each one of those, however many there are, 14, 15 items, can you get potentially 10 underneath that?
Well, I'll answer that question in 2 ways. One is that's a math question, and so I'm going to defer to Mr.
Well,
Pugach.
I'm just saying-
He kind of came up with these, but they were tweaked a little bit. But our previous criteria in years past, the total was 100 points. And we would tweak those around to make sure you couldn't get more than 100 points. So I don't think that we did that this
So
time.
something,
We could get more than.
I'm just trying to, because as you try to compare the weighting, you can kind of do that,
Right.
for the category weighting.
Right.
But then if the category weighting is 1, but the potential points underneath it is you can only get 1, and you got something that's a category weighting of 1/10 of a point,
Right.
but you can get 20 points, I'm just trying to understand how you just.
Each criteria should have 10 points, and then the weighting would adjust each of those. So you can look at just the weighting.
Okay,
If that
so,
makes sense. So
and that's my point here. So, okay,
Yeah.
so like in this first one here, you've got 5 or 4 or 3, or how do you, so you can get a potential of 10 points in there somewhere?
Yeah.
The second on part B, you multiply by two.
Pardon?
I said on part B of safety, you can multiply it by up to 2. So you have a 5 times 2 equals 10.
I got
And then
you.
you weight it up there.
And then the weighting is 1.
Okay, thanks. I just, it was, okay.
It's,
I got it.
again, as I stated at the start, is we're trying to make these as objective as possible, and that kind of, we want to give a greater weight to improve safety, because that's one of our priorities.
Yeah, but if you can get the potential of 10 points out of each one of these, then they're all equal, so the weighting does in fact, is a fair read. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Flynn?
Well, I think environmental justice is the one exception that I noticed that looking through this, it appears you can only get 9. When we get to the discussion, maybe I'll just move it amendments to change transit facilities to 4 or something like that, just to even it out.
Does the board have any committee have any other comments here for open to public comments?
I think it might be useful to sort of walk through the comments and some of the reactions to the, or some of the TAC's response to them. Okay.
Just as a point of information, we also added the environmental justice and ITS categories to the transportation alternatives as well. So those are new criteria there.
So it'll be all 3.
Yeah, and the ITS was already in the CMAT categories. We added environmental justice there as well.
Okay.
So,
No other comments from the board for the minute? Okay. Let's open up the public comment right now, then before we get into the specific comments we received in writing. So does anybody from the assembly here care to comment on we're talking primarily about the roadway and safety project criteria, but I guess I'll open it up to any of the 3. I think they're fairly similar in their content. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Todd Logan, just speaking on my own behalf. I was one of the 2 commenters that submitted comments on this, and while I did not attend the tax session where they went through those, based on my review, it appears they were quite responsive to public comments, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so Greg, can you walk us through the public comments that we did receive then, and how the TAC adjudicated those?
You bet. So the first comment, and I guess I should have noted who gave the comment, but the first comment relates to this idea of complete streets approach. Basically, when you look at fixing a road, you look at every single thing that can go in there, sidewalk, pathways, whoever's going to use it, all that sort of stuff. And we recommended, the staff recommended, and the TAC agreed that we may not want to change it right now, but we should look at adding in our next UPWP task to evaluate and develop a complete streets policy. We have a context-sensitive solutions policy in place right now. This would be another policy that we might want to look at adding. So that's how we answered that comment. The second item here on the first page talks about criterion 1, but one of the comments that came through was you should move safety up to 1. So where it says criterion 1, that would be the old criterion 1, which would now be criterion 2, which is reduces congestion. It took me a little while to figure that one out, sorry. So criterion 1 related to congestion, it talks about level of service and how that should relate to, related to a complete streets policy. Again, we want to look at developing a complete streets policy before we jump the gun on that. We kind of felt. The next one, where it says criterion 2, this would be the safety category. And the comment has to do with the projects that are in this only earn points for motor vehicle safety improvements, and we should look at this as it relates to all users. And our answer to that was this Highway Safety Improvement Program Index, which is what we use to score this category, recognizes and rates crashes involving vehicles, pedestrian, bicyclists, et cetera. So we believe that the criteria that we have right now already reflects projects as it relates to bicycle crashes, pedestrian crashes, all of the above. So we think it already takes care of that issue. The TAC suggested that we look at other ways to evaluate safety and project scoring criteria and tweak the wording a little bit, so we did that. The next page, it says number 4, criterion number 2, again, this relates to the safety, the new one, number 1, and it suggested that this is such an important one that we should increase the amount, the weighting on this. Staff agreed that it should be increased a little bit. The TAC looked at it and felt that it should stay weighted at 1 and reduce some of the other criterion to 0.9. So that's why some of those are in at 0.9. And then they also, TAC suggested what I said was put TAC the very first criteria, or the safety the very first criteria. So, did that. The next page, it says number 5, criterion number 5, this is the quality of life criterion there. Just as an aside, this is just a criterion that typically in the years past has been a very subjective criteria. When you're rating criteria for quality of life, different people have different standards on what criteria of life or quality of life might be. So it's very hard to score this criteria. So the suggestion here was to increase it from 0.25 up to 5, and we thought that that related to, it came from the Bicycle Commuters of Alaska. It related to mostly bicycle and pedestrian use, and we felt that one thing to keep in mind is that this criteria is in the roadway category. And typically, while we sometimes will build facilities, or oftentimes we'll build a pedestrian or bicyclist facility next to it, it's a roadway category. Because sometimes we just are repaving or doing minor rehab. So it made sense to us to leave this at the weighting it was, because when we score projects in the pedestrian or the transportation alternatives category, they're going to get points there and for this same category. So we suggested, and the TAC agreed that no change should occur there. The next criteria is number 8, related to connectivity. And it talks about the idea of multimodal and the suggestion, read this one. You want to change it to relate to modal links and multimodal and all that sort of stuff, and changing the points available here. And we suggested that the points are probably appropriate for what it is, because this is a roadway criteria, and we'll do those standalone projects related to bicycle and pedestrian stuff, and also the CMAX stuff for the transit for that mode in their own categories. So they agreed, leave the points as is and try to maybe tweak the wording a little bit. So that was that. Criteria 9 is functional classification. And this is a very easy one to score, because you just look at what type of road it is and there are your points. So it's a nice criteria. The comment was that the category is far too heavily weighted for freeways and expressways, and you need to worry about minor arterials and other lower classification routes. Our suggestion, staff suggestion, was that the new national goals set forth in MAP 21 really emphasize the national highway system, and so it makes sense to leave it as is, because the funding stream here is it's tightening, and it makes more sense that we continue to prioritize them in this manner, partly because the city can bond for many of its streets, and those are smaller classification streets, and they own the smaller classification streets. So we thought keeping it the way it was made sense, and the TAC agreed with that recommendation. It says back to criterion too here, I apologize. I don't know if that, this is over, Mark, you know if this is over TA? Or is it still back there?
No, it's the same. It's, the first set that you just went through were comments from BCA.
Oh, okay, so these last two
comments
ones are
kind of echo the same.
Okay,
yeah.
I forgot I'd done it. I did it before I left and then I was gone on vacation, so I apologize. So, again, this would be relating to the safety category, and this is a very similar comment to what the BCA said about increasing the amount of points, because it's so important, and again, our comment back here about that is that, you know, we're already reflecting the fact that the bicyclists and pedestrians are included in the HSFB safety index rating, so we thought it would stay the same, so. And this last one looks like it's the same as number 5, which is the one related to quality of life. And the response, again, was the same as we had back there, is that we believe that the weighting and the current point scheme is adequate, so we didn't recommend a change. So hopefully that answers those. You do have those specific comments in your packet there. I can read through them. But that was staff recommendation and the TAC action on those.
Okay, thank you. That's good clarification of those comments.
And the criteria that you have before you reflect those changes. So they reflect the TAC recommendation.
Okay, so with that, Mr. Flynn,
I think we probably need a motion to approve. Do you want to do them one at a time, Mr. Chairman, or do you have to do all three at once?
are you going to be making any suggested modifications?
Once we have a motion, yeah.
Well, is that motion applicable to all 3 sets or just to the
I
first one?
think so. Let's see here. Yeah, definitely for TA, for CMAC. I haven't looked at that one yet. CMAC not have environment.
It's
There it
should be
is.
in the back there.
No, this CMAC already has 10. So I guess we should do them separately.
Unless you're clever enough to make one big motion that covers all 3.
All right, I'll try. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the Transportation Improvement Program criteria approval with the minor amendment to the roadway and safety project criteria and the transportation alternative project criteria, such that in the environmental justice table, transit facilities are changed from 3 to 4 points.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, now, do we have any public comment on that motion before we go any further? Everybody tracking? Everybody know where we are? Okay.
Send it slowly.
People nodded, a few people kind of like that. I'm outside right now enjoying the sun. Any comments? Ms. Edwards, anything you want to say, modify?
No, the only thing I would note is if we make that change, then we also need to change the parenthetical that's under A, about how many points for each one. So that would have to be updated as well.
Okay.
Currently has a typo. that
It
says
currently has a
2
typo
points each.
already. It says 2
should-
points
it
each.
should
It
have
should have said 3 points each, but now it'll be 4 and 3 and 3, so there'll have to be some sort of edit there to clarify that.
Maximum of 4 or some such. Okay? I think we can make that happen, can't we, Craig?
We can do that.
Okay?
Very good with the
Clarification,
language.
thank you. Mr. Birch, any comments or concerns? Mr. Flynn, any other reflections on your motion or anything else?
Just looks like the TAC did a really nice job of addressing the comments that came in, even if they didn't necessarily do exactly what the commenters wanted. I would be interested in a follow-up on the Complete Streets initiative. I think that would be an interesting topic for us to get a little bit more informed about.
Okay. All right, I guess I'll echo Mr. Flynn's comments. I think a lot of work went into this. I think it's, I appreciate Mr. Logan and his group responding. It's unfortunate that in a issue of this magnitude to the community that we have basically one group, or maybe even one person, which is the only entity that took the time to respond to something like this, which I think is going to affect pretty much everybody in this community for the next 10 or 20 years. So I appreciate your efforts, Mr. Logan, and I wish there were a few hundred more of you out there, maybe not with the exact same opinion, but with at least,
There are a few hundred more.
at
Just
least
like
with your
you.
willingness to spend time and respond to these things. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the TAC taking the time and effort to go through this as thoroughly as they had. And with that, I'll say, are there any objections to the motion as proposed in front of us? And seeing none, I'll say the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you. So we now have the 2011-2014 Administrative Mod 6.
Yes, so this is our current tip, and we have two pretty minor changes that we have here. The first one here relates to reflecting in our Table 3 roadways, the fact that in Table 6, we have some additional funding, National Highway System funding, that is going to this Dowling Road Extension West. So Table 3 is part of our allocation, it's not the National Highway System, but we're reflecting in the language there, 6.9 million identified in the STIP. That's the language in red that you see. And then in Table 6 is where you'll see that actual funding show up.
Okay?
So, and
So to clarify, that has nothing to do with our AMATS budget, it's just recognition of additional monies coming in from an outside source.
right, our tip shows all the federal funding that comes into the city for transportation improvements. And so whether it's part of the allocation that we control, AMATS controls, or it's part of the DOT control or the railroad, it has to be shown in its federal funding. So, and there's some other things in Table 6 that reflect the updated STIP. So there's a new project there, this Anchorage Area Principal Arterial Pavement Resurfacing and ADA Compliance. Could have made that a little longer. And the additional funding for this, for the Seward Highway project and for the, reflecting the Dowling Road that I mentioned. The other change in here, you'll like this. We have an existing project in our Table 7, which is a project that is managed by the Public Transportation Department. Relates to fleet improvement and support equipment. And it involves, among other things, mobile display terminals and vehicle communications and location systems in buses. There was some question on whether or not radios could be purchased under the existing language that says vehicle communications, but apparently, just to be on the safe side, we're adding the word radios in there so that there's no question and no challenges and everyone's happy. This is an administrative modification because we're not adding or changing the funding in our three fiscally constrained classifications, the roadway, the TA, or the CMAC, but we're adding a new project, so we brought it here to make sure you guys approve that, the new project in Table 6, and we have that large language change. There it is, recommended by the TAC as well. It's their last meeting. It's before you.
Okay. Do I have any comments from the collective on any of these proposed modifications? Any committee comments at this point?
Ask a couple of questions. Sure.
Please do, Mr. Flynn.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear here, Craig. Basically, this is reflecting additional state dollars, I presume, that were in the FY13 or FY14 budget.
Federal.
But passed through by, approved by the legislature, federal dollars flow to the state in the existing transportation budget. Is that
Right.
Yep. Okay, good. And they came up with an extra 10.2 million for the highway project? No, not quite. Another 8 million for the highway project, is that right?
Well, I see in the red there shows 10.2 and 13 for Seward Highway project, and the pavement resurfacing is 1.75 in 13 and 9.1 in
Well, what
14.
I'm seeing is it grew from 2.2 to 10.2 for the highway.
Right, so 8.
Yep.
Right. Yes, 8, you're right.
Okay.
That was the math.
Well,
See, that's math again, you're doing it.
sorry,
Losing me right away.
bad habit. Okay,
Yeah, it's basically a new STIP was created, and we have to reflect that, so.
Mr. Chairman, I guess a question for you. I mean, was this a DOT-initiated change that the legislature approved, or was something that one of the finance committees did when you weren't looking? Wow.
Certain implications to that, I'm not really sure I want to answer. Let me go and just say that I think what this is, and I'm not sure specifically on this, but we've been challenged lately with our federal dollars, and MAP 21 has refocused some of those federal dollars, put them into different categories and things, and so our STIP is right now trying to catch up with the new federal regulations on where we should be spending our dollars in terms of emphasis areas and those types of things, as we've alluded to here several times over the last 6 months. I don't know specifically on this project, but on a lot of these projects, we're moving stuff from year to year. We may have had, for example, at 36th Avenue, we may have $35 million there, and we may just have moved 10 million of it into 13 to get a head start on some right-of-way acquisition. It may not be changing the total value of the project. It may just be accelerating it ahead into 13 so we can get going on the right-of-way phase, for example. And you may see that if you looked out there in 14 or 15 on the STIP, and ultimately in the tip it will be there as well, it may drop from 35 to 25 or to some other number. So I think that's the main thing that's going on here, is that we're just doing some bookkeeping on the annual expenditures and probably not too much change in the overall package of the project.
I mean, the estimated total project cost appears to have changed, although I can't tell what it changed from on table 6, the Seward Highway. It's in red. So it looks like there's at least some of it's additional money, but as opposed to a shift, but can't really tell. So how does that happen?
Yeah, I think we've got about 35 million on the books for that right now. I guess maybe I should have been more clear on that. The total estimate may still be 60, but I think this 10 million is probably just moving around. It's not necessarily new money. I thought that was the crux of your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't tell if it is.
Right now, the 36th Avenue is 100% state funded, so it's not federal money coming through the system, but we're moving state money around in this one. So ultimately, it's going to need another $30 million to get built in the configuration that we think it's in right now. But again, I think I'll just say that the 10 million is probably for something like right-of-way sooner rather than construction later.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the clarification.
That's what it was.
I didn't say obfuscation.
Okay, so with that,
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve item 5B, the 2011-14 TIP administrative modification number 6.
Second.
moved and seconded, thank you. Any further discussion amongst the committee? Seeing none, any objections to the motion as presented? Seeing none, motion passes, thank you. We now have 2 informational reports. Item A is the annual air quality report. Mr. Ryan, who's going to be?
Matt Stichik with the Air Quality Group in the Health Department is going to provide that.
Well, greetings all. My name is Matt Stichik. I'm an environmental engineer with the Anchorage Air Quality Program, representing about a little bit more than a third of our staff these days. Okay. And I'd like to give you an update of air quality trends and monitoring in the municipality of Anchorage. We either have currently monitor or have recently monitored 4 criteria pollutants: carbon monoxide, particulate matter, ozone, and airborne lead. We also have a air toxics program underway that's not one of the criteria pollutants, but it's one of interest locally. And the 2 remaining criteria pollutants, oxides of sulfur and oxides of nitrogen, are not monitored in Anchorage due to historical low levels. So we currently have 4 active sites. Those are the ones in bold. Turnagain is strictly a wintertime carbon monoxide monitoring site. The Tudor Road site is our representation for maximum potential exposure to coarse particulate. Garden site has a little bit of everything, and Parkgate and Eagle River is just a coarse and fine particulate monitoring site. and DHHS was shut down last year due to limited resources. It's a picture of our garden monitoring site. The two refrigerator boxes on the left are particulate monitors, coarse and fine particulate. I call them refrigerator boxes, they're the shelters for the instruments. The green instrument back there is our pollen counter, and we also have used this site for most of our community-wide air toxic studies, at least involved it in some way. And we also, this is the site where we monitored ozone, and we currently monitor carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide has been a historical problem in Anchorage, but it's pretty much a problem of the past now. Previous studies indicated that about 80% of our carbon monoxide pollution resulted from vehicle emissions, and most of that was due to cold start emissions before the vehicle even left the driveway. And it was through a saturation study, we discovered that some of the highest concentrations are found in older, dense neighborhoods due to a lot of outdoor parking, and hence we instituted the Plug It 20 program to try to improve the situation, encouraging people to plug in their vehicles when they park outdoors at temperatures below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. We've seen some great improvements since the 1980s, when we used to violate the carbon monoxide standard on a regular basis. The red line there is the National Ambient Standard for carbon monoxide. Our last violation occurred in 1996, and we've seen a continuing improvement, and we expect this trend to basically flatten out and continue, and anticipate no further problems complying with the ambient standard for carbon monoxide, and hence we were able to do away with the vehicle inspection and maintenance program. So that program was terminated in March of last year. We were able to complete a limited maintenance plan for carbon monoxide, which kind of streamlines our conformity process, and that is shortly in effect for conformity determinations, and EPA has another year to approve it in whole, or tell us to revise it. Okay, PM 2.5 is fine particulate matter. You can think of this as soot, smoke, to some degree, very fine particulates from earth crustal matter or pollen. But we have a concern that PM 2.5 could be an increasing problem for us if the cost of energy increases locally. This is a situation that Fairbanks is currently in, where the fuel oil is rather expensive, and people ended up burning a lot more wood and had a lot more smoke issues as a result. This graph shows our annual trend in concentrations. The red bars are the annual average, and the black line is showing you the air quality standard for the annual average. So we're less than half of that. Red line up above is the standard for the 24-hour measurement. And if you look at the last 4 years, we're running about 2/3 of that 24-hour standard, looking at our 98th percentile concentrations, which is the design value that's compared against the standard. So right now we're looking good, but if we were to see significant increases in wood burning, especially from outdoor wood-fired boilers, we could have a problem. We currently have a problem with coarse particulate, especially during our spring breakup season, when all that grime melts out of the roadway snow and gets deposited back on the road and re-entrained. We also can see exceedances during windstorms where that silt material gets transported in from the Matsu Valley, such as you see in that satellite photo. Basically, there's silts coming off the river blowing right in over Anchorage. If they're natural events, we can put a bit of effort into explaining it and demonstrating it to EPA and seeking their concurrence to have those violations accepted. So here we're looking at, apologize for the busy graph, but this is showing our concentrations on an annual basis. The points are the first max concentrations. The bars are the second max concentrations each year. And that dashed black line is the 24-hour standard for PM10. Pretty much all those first max concentrations over the standard were exceptional events that we did this process of demonstrating to EPA, and they concurred. The three that you see in red there are exceedances that were not accepted. 2010, we actually had a self-inflicted violation as a result of street sweeping. When you remove the heavy materials, sediments off the road surface, what's left is a flour fine material that can go airborne quite readily. And we've worked very closely with street maintenance in subsequent years to try to control that flour fine material by application of a magnesium chloride brine, which sticks it to the road surface until it can be washed away, usually by rains. And the two exceedances in 2013 were a little bit beyond our control. That was just a freak. That was January 15th, a quick thaw event that deposited a lot of material onto the roadways, got cold again, and that material became airborne. We really don't have a defense to demonstrate that as an exception, so that will be on the record as an exceedance. Two more of those within the next 2 years would be a violation of the standard, and hopefully we can avoid that. Okay, so Anchorage is well off as far as ozone is concerned. We monitored ozone for 3 years at the Garden site. We monitored for 2 years in Park 8 in Eagle River, and we didn't see anything that even approached the ambient air quality standard. Ground level ozone is formed by a reaction of volatile organics and oxides of nitrogen, the presence of heat and sunlight, and you just don't have all three of those elements occurring at the same time. So no man-made ozone problem. And it's interesting to note that all the concentrations that we did measure in town were actually lower than what was concurrently measured in Denali National Park. So we figured what we did see was basically stratospheric ozone mixing back down to the ground level. At the request of EPA, we performed a 1-year study of airborne lead at the Merrill Airport. The marker there is showing the location of our monitoring site, which is at the point, or in very close proximity to where most of the planes run up their engines prior to takeoff. So it was intended to be a maximum potential exposure monitoring site. And what we saw, busy graph here, each of these blue bars represents a sample day. Samples were collected every 6th day for a year. The red dashed line is the ambient air quality standard for airborne lead. It's based on the highest 3-month rolling average concentration. And when we looked at our results, we saw 3-month average concentrations that were less than half of the standard. So EPA said we were done monitoring, and they will take our data as well as that from 17 other airports across the nation that serve primarily piston-powered aircraft, because they're the ones that still burn avgas containing lead, and they'll put that into a model to try to make a an evaluation of concentrations potentially received in close proximity to airports. Okay, we have a local interest in air toxics, especially benzene. Gasoline sold in Alaska has historically had a high benzene content, exceeding 5% on average. But EPA instituted a new regulation that limits benzene content in gasoline to 1.3% by volume from any refinery and 0.62% as an average from the corporate collection of refineries. And we anticipate that that will considerably reduce ambient concentrations. This 2008-2009 study was performed as a baseline to evaluate the effectiveness of this MSAT 2 regulation that lowers the content of benzene in gasoline. And what we saw in 2008-2009 were higher concentrations in the winter months. That makes sense. Cars, the primary source would be vehicle emissions, and cars operate less efficiently in winter, plus you have meteorological conditions that trap those pollutants near the ground. Okay, and at the same time, we measured concentrations within homes for a 1 week period over in each month of the year. And what we saw were indoor concentrations, and this is in homes with attached garages. The idea here is we found that in homes with an attached garage, the benzene or the gasoline that's stored in the garage area readily infiltrates into the home and has resulted in some fairly significant indoor concentrations of benzene. So when we did the 2008-2009 study, we saw indoor concentrations averaging about 7.4%. And a good statistician or epidemiologist helped us figure out that that could result in up to an additional 6 leukemias in a community of our size over a lifetime exposure. So it's a concern. And the concentrations in the garage continue to increase as the temperature goes up, because people have more, they open their windows, they have a lot more air exchange in the house. The concentrations were lower during the summer months. And we hope.
We have a question on that, Mr. Flynn.
Sure.
Question.
Yeah. The previous couple slides back sort of piqued my interest. You had 1.0 something percent in the outdoors and 7 point something in the indoors.
Right.
And I'm looking at this data set. Does that reflect the testing you did only in homes with attached garages, or is that all homes?
No, that's only homes with attached garages. So we would expect homes with a detached garage to have indoor concentrations much closer to ambient concentrations, about that 1.6. But if you've got gasoline stored in an attached garage, it does readily get into the house. So
Can I ask a question on the chart that you just had up there then? Why doesn't there seem to be any shadow effect of the increase in the garage? It actually seems like it decreases in the attached home at that point. How does that correlate?
Okay. So basically, during the summer months, people have a lot more gasoline in their garage, or at least it's volitizing at a faster rate. They've got lawnmowers and other equipment, I presume. So we saw higher concentrations in the garage during the summer months, but we figure the infiltration into the home is less because of, or at least it's being removed more readily due to the increased air exchange, because people are opening windows, opening doors more often. So we saw a slight decrease in the attached garage homes interior concentrations during the summer, but even though the garage concentrations went up. And this year we are repeating the ambient portion of the 2008 study, where every 6 days we're taking a sample of ambient air and analyzing for volatile organics and polycyclic aromatics, including benzene. And we hope to see significant reductions as a result of the decreased benzene content gasoline.
Since that probably looks a whole lot like my house and my garage, at what level do I?
If your garage looks like
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go.
yes.
At what point do you need to start twitching?
And if your garage looks like this and it's attached to your house, the takeaway message is it's really a good idea to get that gasoline storage out of the garage into a shed of some sort, so it's not infiltrating into your home, because it really can be a significant exposure.
That's good thought. At what level, I mean, what's the threshold there that you really need to start?
Well, again, the 2008-9 study showed us that ambient concentrations were at 1 part per billion, and the average inside that living area was at 7.4. So you can figure that same ratio to ambient to indoor is going to relatively. So I don't know that I can offer you a threshold. It's just why have any, exactly, why have any additional exposure than what you can avoid. So the car is not so much an issue, because modern cars have vapor capture systems. It's basically a sealed system. But all these other pieces of equipment and gasoline storage can leak considerably. Are there any other questions?
I have an electrical lawnmower, so I'm did.
Well, Patrick's going to stop cleaning his guns in the bathroom.
It's all relative, but thank you very much, folks.
Thank you. Any other questions while Matt's still here?
Straight, thank you.
Good brief. Yeah,
Thanks.
good brief.
It's overall a pretty positive comment on air quality, too. It seems like most categories are doing pretty well.
We are.
Good.
Chamber of Commerce needs Steve's.
Thank you. Gamble Street redevelopment project. Mr. Cruz is going to lead us through this.
Get a couple of visual aids that will just help you see this. I think this will help. Yeah, please.
Thanks, Paul.
Howdy.
Here's one for here. This is the hospital site. Okay. You're heading south.
Salt Arena.
We're on sales and service. Black Angus Hotel.
There you go.
Crossroads.
Yep.
Cars.
Yep.
Thanks, sir.
Ready?
This is an excerpt from.
Yes, we are. And I'm going to just make a few points. All of this is contained within the documents that you had received, and also all of this is in much more detail at the project website called gamblestreet.com. So if you go to that, all the documents are that. I'm Paul Foose with the Fairview Business Association, and the association was formed by Lucky Wishbone, Copper River Seafoods, Rick Morrison at Morrison Auto, the Aces were some of the lead companies that set it up, and now includes many other businesses in the area. So we got onto this project, the history of it, highway to highway was expected to go through. So no one made any improvements or changes in Gamble Street or that area. A lot of other roads around the city were fixed, but everyone thought that highway to highway would happen in some form or another. When that was called off, we set out to say, okay, what can we do to improve this road, safety, livability, all the standards that you just recently passed in this. And as we went through this at the TAC in detail, it was real interesting to me to think that if you use those and applied them to the existing conditions at Gamble Street, you'd end up with a pretty low score. So we're looking to improve those aspects and to do something, what we set out with is to say, what are the improvements that we could make in the next 10 years that would still stand and be worthy and worth something, even if H2H does go forward at some point in the future. And we understand that planning horizon is 2035 for highway to highway, or I think we're just calling it Seward to Glen connection now, or something like that is the latest name for it.
Midtown congestion relief.
And that's an important one. So, so what we did then is we went to the Mayor Sullivan, and said, we want to study this and take a look at it. He said, I'll write a letter for you. Johnny Ellis carried it forward. We got an appropriation from the legislature to do some engineering work on this to see what improvements could be made. And we talked to Jeff Otteson, head of planning at DOT, and some other people, Jill out at the at DOT here, and the governor signed off on the appropriation. So then we went and we hired CH2M Hill and Kittleson was a successful bidder on it to take a look at this. And we've been working with the Downtown Partnership. Some of their area crosses over into this, the Fairview Community Council. DOT and Municipal Transportation Planning have been involved in this planning effort. They made it clear that doesn't mean they endorse it or that they were speaking for the department, but they were there to be a technical resource to us. And then also the Alaska Trucking Association, we had them involved in this. So what did we find as we took a look at it? If you look at the road here, it's a 4-lane road. But what happens is we have no place to put the snow, so the snow gets stacked up on the sidewalk. This is 5 or 6 feet tall this year. And no place for the snow to go, so it crowds it. So what happens in the winter, it's not 4 lanes anymore, it's 3 lanes. But nobody knows where the lanes are. There's no lines, so it is a free-for-all. And you want people driving the same patterns all the time. So, going from 4 to 3 in the winter and back, it's one of the issues we identified. Now, also, the power poles, municipal light and power, are right next to the road here, and they're in there. And so this takes up the entire sidewalk. I mean, this is a clear ADA violation. You can't even, they try to get by here, but we got people in wheelchairs right out in Gamble Street with the traffic roaring by. And so the other thing, let me get this one where I want to show you this picture, and then I'll pass it around. So what happens is this is a picture of a telephone pole. To try to guard it, they put a piece of railroad rail and driven it in there, and a jagged piece of metal is kind of a punji stick for cars to try to hit before they hit the telephone pole as a defensive measure, because what happened is, there were wooden poles, and a car did hit one of the poles and knocked it over, and it fell over and electrocuted 2 people, killed them. So, this whole idea of, let's underground the utilities, and the other thing you can see, you can't even get in here to plow if you even wanted to. You can't get in to get it off of there. So so what we came up with, and the other thing I want to point out, this is a really good visualization here, because if you look down by the Sullivan Arena, look into this area here, this is maximum traffic flow. You got traffic backed all the way up to the arena. I mean, it's just congested, this is maximum congestion. Well, now go back and look at the intersections along Gamble Street. There's no traffic there. That's not where the congestion is. So what we did is we set out to really, take a look at what's happening there. We knew this would have to be data-driven. If we were going to do something, we had to prove that whatever we were proposing could change. So that's in those documents that I gave you here. And the first one, this is the DOT historical data with the blue dots on it. So when you look, it's about 12,000, if you take it all day, it's about 50,000 on Gamble and Ingram. They both flow along there. So if you look at the last data, 2010 that we have, we're at the same traffic level on Gamble, Ingra that we were in 1993. Now, it climbed up, starting in 85 and went, came up to a max here in 2005. What we think is happening here is the other improvements that you've made in the other roads, the Elmore and some of the things out east, are having an impact that you're seeing here on relieving some of the congestion. This traffic seems to have leveled out. And we thought that there would be more data available. There wasn't all the data that we needed. So Kittleson went in and put in recorders, and we recorded 24/7 for 2 weeks. Gamble Street, the entire flow along there, all the intersections, everything, to get the most reliable data for it. So those are included in these. And what we came up with is we can widen the sidewalks, we can underground the utilities, and we can believe that we can still have, this is the existing roadway now, 4 lanes with a sidewalk. If we go to 3 lanes, we can make a 9-foot sidewalk. We can have 3.5 feet for snow storage. We can have 3 clearly defined lanes. And we can move all of the light poles and anything else out here to the side. Now, when we went through this whole public planning issue, some of the issues came up. Well, how about a bike path along here? Well, that really doesn't work. This is a major thoroughfare. So, usually you try to build that in, but this is in part an industrial road, and we know we have to accept that. We also didn't want to have any intrusions here of shrubbery or anything else or other architectural features that would keep the snow from being cleared. We need to do that. So I guess you'd say it's a combination of still a high flow through road, but has very practical amenities for clearing the snow and trying to deal with some of the ADA and access issues. So what we came up with, if you look at page 2 of this document, these are the levels of service that were projected at the intersections. It's a little graph on that page for the intersections in that area if we went to 3 lanes. The top one is the level of service under 4 lanes. The below are under 3 lanes. And what we found is it worked all along the corridor, except that there was an unacceptable reduction in level of service at 15th and Gamble, where there's a pretty substantial left-hand turn there. So if we included a left-hand turn lane for a 4th lane at 15th and Gamble, we came back within acceptable parameters for the safety of an intersection. So when we looked at this, what were the projections that we used? Well, if you historically, from 1985 up to 2010, that's a 0.6% increase per year. Now, we see it's leveling off, but rather than say we know that's permanent, maybe it would grow, we say, okay, we'll assume a 1% increase a year, which is higher than even the historical record here. And we'll use that as a very conservative estimate for what those service levels are going to be by the year 2035. So that's what these levels of service are based on, a 1% growth rate per year up to 2035, at which point we are assuming something's going to happen with highway to highway, or maybe enough improvements are made elsewhere in the system that this is an acceptable level of traffic on Gamble. The very last page shows you other 3-lane roadways, comparison to similar roadways within Anchorage that are 3-lane, some of which are handling more traffic and it's flowing in a good manner. We don't hear any complaints about it. And then it shows you, these flow rates compared to Gamble compared to 5th, 6th, and C Street. If highway to highway does go through, then within this, what you can do is we can turn Gamble back into a 2-way street in some way. Maybe it's 3 lanes with a turn lane and parking here or something like that. So without having to change the right-of-way, then we can, in the far future, 30, 40 years out, this is still going to be a usable lineup. So, well, where are we today? We took it this far where, by I believe this next Monday or Tuesday, we'll have our final plan ready to be posted, and we'll let you know. It's going to be basically the same as the document that you see in front of you. Well, when we went to DOT and Municipal Transportation Plan, and he said, well, we're just getting this, we want to look at it. So they haven't endorsed it. They participated in it. They asked for the original data, all the data that we collected, and we provided that. They requested some additional data and some additional analysis, and I think we're probably, we talked with the mayor about this, we'll probably be coming to the assembly asking for just a small appropriation to do that additional work to satisfy, some of the concerns or the things that people wanted to see at municipal transportation planning and DOT. Now, in 2015, DOT is planning on resurfacing this road. And if there's any way we can make that timeline, and I know that's ambitious, within that, we think all this work ought to be done at once. It makes more sense to do it at once. It's more cost efficient. But part of the analysis that we need to do with MLMP, what's it really going to take to underground those? Now, they have some funds for it, but they probably don't have enough to do the whole thing. If we're going to move the curb line, what's the condition and status of the storm drains in that area? We're not sure yet if that's Public Works or DOT. For the sidewalk, who owns that sidewalk and is responsible for the ADA issues? Anyway, we need to sort all that out to really come up with a final plan, and in the end, the legislature is going to have to take a look at this because the resurfacing, the repaving, and redoing the corners, the intersections for ADA, that's federal highway money. The rest is going to have to be state money. So we presented this to the TAC. We took some questions from them, but that's where we are, and that's part of our efforts to economic revitalization of Fairview overall. We really need to fix this road, and so this is a start of a presentation for you, and we sure would appreciate any advice you have for how we should move forward on this and do it and make sure that we're staying within the parameters that you need to keep the traffic flowing, but also do something to address the serious safety issues and community development issues that are contained in this proposal. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Paul, you were talking about congestion here, and I think that's certainly interesting, but it looks to me like the reason why the congestion is down here is different than that is because that, in essence, funnels down to 3 lanes, because the one lane is a left turn lane into the neighborhood up at the top of the hill. So isn't this more an indication as to what a 3-lane road would look like?
No, sir, actually, that's incorrect, and this was something that they looked at that was beyond the scope of what we looked within the Gamble Street corridor. What happens, people do use that 4th lane. It's supposed to be a turn lane, but it really isn't. This is more of the confusion. People get out there, then they're trying to dive back in every step of the way before they get to Latouche. And so just even outside the scope of our work, Kittleson did come in and say, you ought to come out and actually make that 3-lane to where when you get past First National Bank, then you say it's a left-hand turn lane because it's very confusing. And in that area, I also want to say that what we asked these guys to do is to model an event at the Sullivan Arena, and that's never been done before. And that's a real mess, and that's something that really needs to be addressed, probably separately of this project, of the traffic management plan. And one of the things we're working on with the Community Development Authority and some private partners is possibly a parking structure where the ACE's headquarters is, and that strip joint is for sale down there. Because if you could do that, people coming from Midtown can turn before they get to 15th, go into the parking structure and go out without doubling up to 15th, doubling back. That's where a lot of the congestion comes from. And if you have some amenities there, like a restaurant or something, people hang out a little bit before and after. It kind of evens out the flow so everybody isn't trying to go at once. We're cooperating with the Chesapeake Sports Complex plan that's going in. They thought they were going to get a lot more parking spaces when they looked into it, but by the time they had safe separations and storm drains and everything, they're only picking up about 400 spaces, and they need 1,200 for the arena. So we're working
Second
on
level. The second level parking.
Yeah, and maybe some, high rent, some condos on top of it or something that makes commercial sense. And anyway, we're working with the Community Development Authority and some other people to try to put that together as well.
Hey, Paul, what's the
What's this fourth alternative on page 3? 3-lane section with southbound left turn lane and dual westbound lefts.
You want to, we've got Jim Potts here from CH2ML and also Gary Catsian from Kittleson.
I think that was just an additional effort to improve the level of service at that intersection. If they add another left turn heading eastbound or westbound to southbound right in front of the Aces, it would improve the operations a little bit.
Okay, so two left-hand turn lanes for people traveling eastward on 15th to turn south onto Gamble.
West.
Yeah.
No, they're coming off of Gamble and they're turning on to 15.
No, but the additional alternative is another left-hand turn westbound to southbound.
I got you, okay.
That was the fourth alternative. So, you know, that in combination with a southbound to eastbound left would make it better. The southbound to eastbound left is required, but an additional westbound to southbound would improve it even more.
It changes the numbers a little bit, but it doesn't change the level of service rate.
Well, I'm looking at your exhibit, figure 6C here, so it's three lane section, a southbound left turn lane, you've got one of those on here, and dual westbound lefts.
Those aren't shown on that figure. That was just sort of a additional analysis we did to say, hey,
Do you have that figure?
Well, how do you take a left on, but a westbound would be that way, it would be a right, would it not?
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Would it, so dual westbound lefts, but if you're taking a left off of Gamble, dual westbound lefts, wouldn't you be taking, you're taking, this is a one-way, so you'd be taking a
Yeah,
right to go westbound.
I think that's a typo.
So dual westbound rights.
That, I think so. yes.
Well, aren't they talking about a 15th onto
It's on
Campbell?
This is Gamble.
15th going westbound. It's basically the people that are making a loop
15
around.
goes east and west.
That is a left
Right,
turn.
and so you'd need there's already a left turn lane there, what you're looking at.
Oh, okay,
is a
okay, so,
second left turn.
okay, I'm
Because
getting
you
it.
have
So if
plenty
you're-
of lanes on Gamble to accept them.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, I'm
It's a
sorry.
single left now, I think the lane is there, you just have another turn lane. But that whole thing needs to be addressed,
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
knows that.
No, it's a tangle.
And so,
I've been there.
anyway, but thanks for that clarification.
No,
And,
Yeah, I guess just to build a little bit on what Paul said, the 60-foot right-of-way is, that's all we have there. And, there was a big focus on will 3 lanes work? And we put quite a bit of effort into it, and we think that traffic will flow at an acceptable level of service through there. And we can, take advantage of that right-of-way and potentially, ease the development of this corridor and ease the process of, maybe minimize right-of-way acquisition and make it easier to fit a project through here. So that's sort of the upside of it. It will take more money though, so, and the poles to be undergrounded is an issue. That's anywhere from $4 to $10 million we calculated, so we need to dig in a little bit there and sort of refine these costs and hopefully get a project that we can develop here in the near future instead of, 20 years from now. So,
the other thing that they modeled was the travel speed along the road, and so it modeled in at about between 30 and 35 miles an hour and flowed really steadily through, and it's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, so nothing would change with that. And also that the light timing was pretty good, the light sequencing was working pretty good on 9th and 13th, so it's operating pretty well. But the winter conditions are really bad there.
question here?
Yes, sir.
Presently, on the east side of Ingra, between Northern Lights and 15th, there's a decent sidewalk where people can bike and so forth, but once you hit 15th, it just becomes a narrow sidewalk, basically.
Yeah, I think it's like a 36-inch sidewalk along there. So one thing is we did talk to some of the planners at DOT. What they said was if you're going to do this to Gamble, you ought to eventually do it to Ingra. And a part of it is training drivers to drive safely. And if you're in the same pattern, if you're in 3 lanes where you go, you know where you are, and it gives more width for a bicycle or,
So I was wondering, does that 3-lane option incorporate any way to accommodate that
pedestrian bicycle traffic north of 15th.
There was so much traffic on there, we really didn't want to try to fit a bike lane within here and have a separate bike lane. You know, a 9-foot sidewalk, you know, the hardcore commuters going 40 miles an hour on a bike, that isn't going to work. The people just recreational going, you can fit pedestrians and a bicycle on a 9-foot sidewalk. So we're not going to designate it at that. The designated bike route is Cordova Street.
I don't think bikes are allowed on sidewalks north of 9th Avenue.
Well, that is, they're not allowed in downtown, but they're allowed everywhere else. So, in any case, we think it'll accommodate it, but, you know, this is a deal from the Trucking Association. You try to put a bike lane in there and make it, you know, kind of the, you know, and all this, you know, it adds too many other factors. So that was a compromise that we made, is we accept that it's going to be limited bike travel, probably limited to being on this sidewalk here.
And that
But at least the sidewalk would be open year-round, it wouldn't be completely snowed in.
That cross-section was a result of like a 3-day charrette where we had, you know, 30 or, I don't know, 20 cross-sections, you know, with different dimensions, different accommodations, landscaping, no landscaping. And this was the one that sort of floated to the top, met most of the goals and the purpose of the project.
Standard lighting, fixtures and things like that, nothing fancy that you'd have to order special, you know, all within the standards. Similar to 9th Avenue, what was done with the rebuild of 9th Avenue, in terms of the lighting and the sidewalk. So we'll stay in touch, but we'd appreciate your support on this. We think we're on the right track with this, and we get a lot of support. We're gonna push it along, and we appreciate Director Campbell, your department looking at it, and the city taking, you know, making sure we're not making some unnecessary compromise to move in the traffic. But if we can do this, we think it's going to mean a lot for our neighborhood.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, and I assume that you've still got, probably listed within here somewhere, a website where this stuff is online.
GambleStreet.com.
Is it on the document here, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're within a
Virtual
couple.
open house, I think it's still live. You can
Yeah.
watch a
Okay.
video presentation if you.
Yeah, that's really useful. And then, like I said, within a couple of days, we're going to final this, and it'll be available.
And the website will remain live.
Great, thank you for your time and presentation.
Can I take these maps back?
Good, thank you. So we've come to the part of the meeting where the committee gets to make any additional comments for the benefit of those in attendance, or their conscience, or whichever they choose. Mr. Flynn. Ms. Birch. Ms. Edwards.
I just wanted to thank everybody again for all the hard work on those other criteria. I really thought that was well done.
Okay. I don't believe I have any further comments either. Mr. Lyon, can you reconfirm when our next policy committee meeting? There was a little bit of an email battle going on between you and I about when that might be. Can you confirm for those in attendance when that next meeting will actually be happening?
Yes, it will be our regularly scheduled time, July 25th. I know you mentioned before, maybe the 1:30. If you're serious about that, we can.
Would anybody have an objection to us moving the meetings to 1:30 to at least slot into my lunch hour selfishly a little better?
I know when we get the room, we schedule this room about a year in advance. So it's from 1 to 3. Now
We're very seldom in here till 3.
Exactly. So
So even if we start
probably
at
okay, but
1:30,
I will
think-
double check.
Okay.
I'm sure we can
If you can
accommodate.
do it,
the time.
I think I'd appreciate it. And if it doesn't work out, well, then I'll take the brunt.
I also wanted to point out, I dropped off the executive summary from the NTP in the category of better late than never. So it's about probably a year past due, but this reflects the work done by Kittleson, Gary and his group. It's a really nice executive summary of the NTP there. So and I gave more copies to Bart to have over DOT, and then I have some more here, and if folks want them, I have some more.
Okay, well, I thank everybody for their attendance, and I think unless there's an objection, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 2:20.